You're listening to the Go Getter Podcast. I'm your host, Candice Janae. I'm a digital marketing and automation strategist and business coach. I'm the CEO and founder of Epic Fab Girl, where we help Christian women entrepreneurs market and scale their service-based businesses beyond six figures as they grow deeper in their faith. So whether you're a coach, speaker, or a service provider, this podcast will drop gems, bringing you tips, strategies, and stories from experts to help you take your life, business, and relationship with God to the next level. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Go Getter Podcast. I'm your host, Candice Janae, and I'm so excited, per usual, because we have another amazing and incredible woman entrepreneur who we're going to hear from today on her journey and her story to building a six-figure business as a woman of faith. So let's get into who we're hearing from today. Faneisha, also known as Fo Alexander, is a certified financial educator and founder of Mama and Money. And she empowers women through financial stewardship and entrepreneurship, reaching over 40,000 people monthly. Also leading the Monetized Mom, she guides coaches in marketing and sales systems for business efficiency. Formerly an engineer like myself, okay, she applies her corporate expertise to help clients build streamlined, successful businesses underpinned by her strong faith and dedication as a wife and mother. Y'all, give it up for Fo. Welcome. We are so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Candice. I'm super excited to be here. What you are doing is amazing. So I'm honored to be on your platform.
Listen, I love it. Listen, you my kind of girl. Like, I love anybody who's open about their faith and who's really dedicated to helping people in business, and you can tell that they're not in it just for the money. Like, I love the girlies like that, and you definitely fall into that category for me. And so I would love to know from you, like, I know we heard your bio, but tell us a little bit about yourself and just your journey to starting a business. Like, how did you even get into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so interesting and long journey, I will say. So it started around 2012, and that's when I started blogging. Had no idea you could make money online, didn't know anything about brand deals, monetization, digital, none of that existed back then. So I was blogging. I had actually just moved to Houston for work. It was my first corporate job, and I was by myself. My family was on the East Coast, and so I was like, I need a way to let them know what's going on. So I started blogging, and people started actually reading it literally all over the world. And so on that blog, I was kind of sharing my journey of faith. Had just gotten out of a bad relationship. So it was all like lifestyle type stuff. And I got on the journey of paying off debt. And so I started sharing like financial education, and people started saying, you need to write a book. So I would say my journey into entrepreneurship, I kind of stumbled upon. So 2015, I wrote my first book, which it wasn't a compilation of those blog posts, but it was talking about my journey and my testimony in my walk with Christ. And then eventually I started getting into financial education. That turned into a financial education blog, that turned into a book, that turned into speaking engagements, brand deals, all kinds of stuff. And so I kind of stumbled upon this world of content creation. And then from there, it kind of spun into using the skills that I had learned from building websites, creating systems, marketing, to then teaching other people, other moms particularly, how to do it. So I became a full-time entrepreneur 2 years ago after having my second child. And what kind of pushed me into entrepreneurship was in 2017, I got laid off. It was months after we had just purchased our house. And I'm like, okay, this side hustle that was a side hustle was about to be a full-time business because I'm not trying to go back to work. Ended up going back to work, but that really put a fire under me to say, hey, like, as much as we like to think corporate careers are stable, they aren't. So you need to start really building this thing out that you thought was a hobby. And so that's what I started doing. And then, of course, the pandemic came. And I remember this conversation I will never forget. I had my manager tell me, we were on a call talking about working from home, because then working from home was like a foreign concept to everyone. And I was just adamant about not going back into the office because I just had my daughter and I wasn't ready to put her in daycare. And I remember this manager telling me, you can't be effective at your job with a baby at home. Now, this person doesn't have kids. It was a man, first of all. I was like, first of all, who are you talking to? But he didn't have kids, so he didn't understand, like, I'm not about to put my child at risk. And so that was like that in that moment, it was a defining moment to say, I'm quitting this job. And so I had my second child and I was out on maternity leave. So that was kind of my long journey into entrepreneurship, kind of stumbled upon it, started making money and realizing that I had something to offer people and help them. And it's kind of been that since.
Wow. It's so interesting because I feel like everybody has this interesting journey of how they get into entrepreneurship. But when I heard you talking about your journey, you were like, and then this turned into this, and then that turned into that. Like, talk to us about like the pivots along the way. Like, I know you mentioned doing websites for people. I know you mentioned like doing so many different things leading up to where you are now. Like, how did you know what to focus on and in what season and when to pivot and when to shift and what was actually really going to make you money? Like, what did that journey actually look like?
I have made so many pivots. When I tell you, of course, like I said, I started off blogging. I was talking about personal finance. I even did like DIY fashion. So I was sewing clothes. So I was in that mix, like in magazines, working with like some of the pattern companies and stuff. So I've made several pivots. And a lot of it is like literally, okay, what am I interested in at the time? And then really getting deep into what is it that I think I'm called to. And I will say that the major pivot into me sticking into personal finance was my husband and I went on a trip for our anniversary. We went to the UK and we went to like one of those palaces. I can't remember the name of it. One of them. And anyway, we saw all these jewels and all these riches. And I remember God speaking to me on the bus on the way from there. I was sobbing and God was like, this is an earthly kingdom. What do you think I have for my kingdom? And so many of us are living below what God has for us. So that pivot into personal finance was that was from God. Everything else was like, okay, you played around, you tried, you know how you kind of you're starting to figure things out when you're online. Like, let me try this, maybe this will work. That was like, no, God saying you need to stick in this lane with personal finances. And so that major pivot, that was just hearing from God. And since then, it's been a matter of, okay, God, what do you want me to do with this? Like, you want me to help people. You want me to teach them about kingdom abundance. You want me to teach them about stewardship. Okay, what else do you want me to do? And then last year was another major pivot in my business as well. And that was just hearing from God. So I think it kind of started off as I stumbled upon it. Oh, let me do this because I'm interested in it. Or people are asking me to do this type of stuff because I have this expertise and this skill. And then it really became focusing on what God really wanted me to do to help serve his people.
Yeah, I got so many questions. And the one that's like most top of mind is like, I feel like so many believers struggle with charging for their services, especially when they have audiences that they're trying to help. And especially when you're talking about helping people become financially free, you're talking about helping people, get to a different place when financially, like, did you go through any feelings of like, maybe I needed to not charge as much, or like talk to us about how you determine like what you should even be charging and pricing your services at when you have something that, is meant to help people, but they still have to spend some money to get the help they need.
Yeah, so that's a weird balance, especially for anyone in the personal finance space. Is like, how are you going to help people get out of debt, but then they got to pay you? So it's a weird balance. And so I did kind of struggle at first with understanding the value that I was offering. But one thing that I decided, at least in that space, when it comes to personal finances, is that I'm always going to have other ways to get paid. So even if I'm giving out free content, whether that's on a YouTube video or if I'm doing some kind of engagement or anything like that, like I can give that stuff away for free, but I know that, God is going to open doors for corporations to pay me or for a speaking engagement to come up or for my book to be sold. So I kind of took that approach. I was doing like financial coaching. And again, it's kind of trying to figure out what's the right investment point for people to want to make a change and to be committed versus understanding their situation. But I think the thing for me, at least in that space, is knowing that there are other ways that I can get paid. So that's the approach that I took in that space. When it comes to like the marketing space and helping people in business, I'm like, nah, like if I'm helping you make money, like sis, there is going to be an investment, especially based on all the years and the work and experience that I've had to get to this point. So I don't know. I think a lot of people struggle with that price. I certainly did in the beginning, But again, like in the personal finance space, I knew that there were other ways for me to get paid.
So good. Like, and you brought up something that's so important is like, especially if you helping people get results, right? Like, and I know sometimes people get very tied up in like, well, my result isn't money related. Like, yeah, you help people with marketing, you're helping them get a result, but it's like that result has so much value, so then you can charge for it. But even if you have a service or a business that isn't necessarily for entrepreneurs or helping people make more money, there's still something valuable on the other side that they're getting that is worthwhile, getting paid that. And so I want to pivot back to like the part of the conversation where we talked about you going back to corporate, because I feel like in 2023 or 2022, one of these years, the term quiet quitting kept coming up and like that whole thing. And, I always thought it was interesting because for me personally, like God told me to quit my job in 2017. And he told me specifically that I would not go back to corporate unless it was under certain, under a certain, stipulations that still haven't happened. So I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I'm not going back to corporate. And when I do go back to corporate, they hiring me as a company. Like, I'm not going into a corporate space as as an entrepreneur. But that was the instruction that God gave me personally. And so I would love to hear just kind of like your thoughts on going back to corporate, like, and how that was for you, and like the role that God played in that, and how you knew you should go back to corporate, and then also transitioning out of corporate and into full-time entrepreneurship. I would just love to hear that journey, because I know there's so many women who are listening to this podcast that are stuck in a job that they're not certain they should still be in.
So I got laid off in 2017. So it wasn't a matter of me like taking an extended break. I literally got laid off I didn't want to go back to work, but that next week I ended up getting another job. So there was maybe like a 2-week break and I took a vacation in one of those weeks. So it wasn't a matter of like taking an extended break and then decided to go back to corporate. But that was more about the decision to like remain in the corporate space was more about financial goals that we wanted to meet as a family. So a huge goal that we were trying to reach was like paying off our mortgage. Because I told you I got laid off like months after literally closing on the house. So then the goal became, okay, let's just pay this thing off. So that was more geared towards a financial decision. But I will say, I don't think I've ever shared this story anywhere else, to be honest. But I will say that layoff came with the severance, of course. So I got a severance package, which meant I got money. And in my head, I was like, oh, Lord, this is a sign. Like, you giving me money, start up for my business, and I'm going to have all this money to put towards investing in my business. And I remember my husband coming to me and him telling me like, hey, I think the Lord is telling us to sow this as a seed. And so what we ended up doing, like, I mean, I can't even remember how big that check was because I had been with them for years, but we sowed that seed as a never again seed. And essentially what we declared was that never again would I be laid off from a job. And the next time that I left, either of us left the corporate space, it will be on our own will. And so fast forward 5 years later, I left my corporate career on my own choice. And so again, it wasn't an experience where I had to go back in corporate. I chose to continue working because of the financial goals, but I knew that God had a plan for me when it came to entrepreneurship, and he had a plan for me when it came to being able to be home with my kids. And so we sowed that seed and we saw God, like, literally that thing happened 5 years later, and I have no plans of going back to corporate at all. And if my husband decides that he wants to walk away from his job, like, it's going to be because he wants to, because we sowed that seed.
Man, oh my goodness. Now we got to press into the concept of tithing and sowing, which I'm so glad we got here. And yes, we're going to get to the part of, talking about building a 6-figure business, getting there, all the things you need to have a 6-figure business, all that stuff. But this is a podcast about Jesus, to be honest. Like, we just here living in our purpose, and like all of us are called to live for God. And we just happen to be doing additional work that looks like the work that we're doing now. So I would love to know about your journey of tithing and how, like, because I'm assuming that check was at least a 5-figure check, right? Like, to be giving away that much money and sowing that much and releasing that much, like, talk to me about the concept of tithing in your life in general, and then just the role that has kind of played in your business when it comes to tithing.
Yeah, so tithing, it hasn't been unfamiliar to me as an adult. Like my parents tithe. I heard my dad always talking about tithing. So I knew the concept of tithing since I've been little. And so when I started working, I was always giving, right? And that was just something that I grew up doing. So the idea of sowing a seed wasn't foreign, right? I think my husband comes from a space where he gives a lot more than I had done in the past. So that was a challenge where like, wait, we gonna like so that much? Like it's some things that we could do. So I had to kind of grow into the level of giving that we do now and sowing that we do now. But as far as tithing, like that has always been kind of mandatory for me and my finances. And I know some people have a story where like they haven't always tithed. That hasn't necessarily been my story. And I'm grateful because I know the blessing that's attached to it, the security that's attached to it. Like I know all the things that are attached to it. So tithing is something that we do in our household, and tithing is also something that I do in my business. And I don't know if a lot of people do this. I don't know if this is a part of a lot of people's budgets, but the first line item when it comes to any income that comes into the business, that money goes out as a tithe, because I'm like, Lord, I want that protection over my business. I want you to open up the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing on my business. Like I want you to rebuke the hand of the devourer over my business. So tithing is a part of every part of my life. And in addition to tithing, so is sowing, because I understand like when you give, you will receive. Like if you sow abundantly, you're going to reap abundantly. So those are just principles that we live by. And those are things that I incorporate in the business as well. So, whatever comes in is going to go to God first, what's due to him. And then whatever God tells us that we need to sow, whether he's speaking through my husband or he's speaking through me, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it quickly. And so I think that's how you stay blessed. If anybody's ever wondered, that's how you stay blessed.
Listen, it's you dropping Malachi 3:10 over here real swift and easy, okay? Because you know that the Bible literally says to try him in this, like try him in this. And to be honest, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. Last year, in 2023, God started to deal with me about the concept of tithing, because I would tithe off of my personal stuff like clockwork. That's how I grew up. But then when it came to tithing in my business, because when I first started my business, when I was looking online and trying to figure out like, okay, like what should I tithe off of? Do I tithe off of like what I pay myself? Do I tithe after the net or the gross? Like, do I tithe? Like there wasn't information out there on the internet about that. And I remember having conversations with friends, and I had one really great friend who is an amazing businessman. And literally, I remember him saying, he was like, well, do you want to tithe off of like, do you want to be blessed because of everything to come in or just a part of it? And I remember hearing that and being like, and kind of dismissing it, and, kind of coming to terms with it on my own and being like, well, I'm going to just tithe off of, the amount that I pay myself or whatever. But then God started dealing with me earlier this year or earlier in 2023, like, why don't you just tithe off of everything? Like, the Bible literally says that we should bring our first fruits, and like, and then it just had me in this place like, dang, like not me doing this in my personal finances and neglecting to do this in my business. And when I tell you that I started to see a major shift in my business, literally after I started tithing, I'm telling you, income skyrocketed after starting the tithe. And I'm like, why wasn't I doing this before? But it's also because nobody's teaching about it and nobody's talking about it. So thank you for bringing that concept up.
If you've learned anything from this podcast, I know you're going to love the Go Getter Confidential Click at gogettermembership.com. It's a global membership community for Christian women entrepreneurs to connect, build wildly profitable service-based businesses, and grow their faith. So whether you're just getting started with an idea or you already have an established brand and you want to lay the foundation for six-figure income, the Go Getter membership is just what you need. With expert masterclasses, monthly prayer, and tons of courses and downloads, your business will be better because of it. Entrepreneurship isn't easy, but this community will help you go from feeling stuck to clear and motivated. Join today at gogettermembership.com and save 50% off your first 3 months when you use code podcast at checkout. We'll see you inside.
Now, my question to you is about this journey to starting to get paid. Like, what was it when you like, okay, because I know you talked about like the finance business, personal finance business, but then you also have this business that is about like marketing and all of that. Which was the business that first helped you get to six figures, and like what were you selling to get to six figures?
So the personal finance business, that's what I've been doing the longest. And so a combination of things. So digital products, brand partnerships. Brand partnerships were a major aspect of that. So collaborating with brands on doing like app stuff and you know how brand partnerships go. So doing work with brands.
Well, let's talk about for the girlies who don't know how brand
Okay.
partnerships go. So yeah,
Okay.
like so what did that look like? So they're coming to you. You had a platform. Did they come to you? Were you pitching yourself? Let's talk about what that looked like.
So both. So I started building relationships because my blog had gained traction. And so, you know, I had been featured on some different sites and stuff. It started getting popularity and getting known. So in some cases, brands would approach me. I'm thinking about one in particular where they approached me saying, hey, you know, we love your content. Let's partner. And so we started this whole partnership where, you know, they would help produce content and then they would pay me to make videos. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is like pitching to brands. So for instance, if I'm writing an article on a particular topic, then I will reach out to a brand that's relevant. So I'll give you a prime example. I was doing an article on estate planning. And so there is a website that allows you to do estate planning online. It's pretty reasonably cost. I know how much it costs to go to an attorney. So I was like, this is a great alternative. Let me pitch to them to see whether they'll sponsor this. And so doing things like that, affiliate marketing, where I'm getting commission off of recommended products, those types of things. And then creating content. So I was getting money off of my blog as revenue because I had so many visitors per month. So we're talking about 50,000 people visiting the site a month or more. And so that turns into ad revenue every time someone comes in and sees an ad on the website. Same with YouTube. So as people are watching the videos, I'm able to get money from that. And then I was selling digital products as well. So I have a book that I was selling. I have a budgeting template. I had like an Etsy shop. So it was a whole bunch of different things combined that allowed me to get to that point. And then also doing some speaking, like as I started having kids, that kind of like calmed down a little bit just because I'm not outside like that. But, you know, doing some like speaking engagements that allowed me to get those bigger lump sums of money.
Got it. So you were leveraging your content to get paid by brands. You were doing affiliate marketing with your blog. Are you still blogging now? Like, do you still create blog content? Are you still generating revenue in that way, or have you slowed down?
So I've slowed down a bit. Two reasons. One, I really want to focus on the marketing aspect. I really love that. The second reason is because the blogging space, Google algorithms, AI has completely disrupted the infopreneur space and content creation space. So it's a little bit, you know, sticky these days. But I still do have content. I still do have videos that are still able to generate money because they are evergreen content. Like it doesn't matter what time of the year or what year it is, budgeting is still going to be the same. Paying off debt is still going to be the same. So I was very strategic around the content that I created, obviously to help people, but also knowing that it's a long game. And I wanted to create something that's evergreen, that no matter what year it is, it's still going to be relevant to the reader or the viewer who's watching the information.
So dope. And I love that you use your traffic to like get paid by like brands, but also get affiliate sales. But then you also created your own stuff, right? Like, okay, if y'all gonna find some, here's some for y'all to buy, right? So I know you're an entrepreneur who works in who offers not just digital products, but you also now offer done for you services for marketing. So talk to us about, as a service provider, like what you think is essential to building a six-figure business as a service provider, and like what are some of the things you would have done differently, like if you were to had to start over from the beginning as a service provider doing done for you services?
Yeah, so this is actually my second go around doing done for you services. So remember back, I was doing everything, right? So I would say if I were to, now that I am doing it over again, I know that I'm going to charge more and I'm going to have boundaries. Because when I first did it, I was just like undercharging, doing way too much work, scope creep, like not getting paid for the work that I was doing. And so, it was just trying to figure it out. So I can't be mad at myself for where I was then, because now it's prepared me for where I am now. So I would definitely say if someone is just starting out as a service provider, knowing the value of what you have to offer, standing firm in your pricing, making sure it makes sense for the amount of time and work that you're doing, being clear on your boundaries. Those are all things that are important if you're doing that. And I think business overall, the way that I'm supporting, like I would say the most important thing that you need to have is systems, like systems. And because I do support moms, that's even more important, like having automations, having systems, having structure, that's going to be important because time is limited and like it's just a crazy world. So I would say systems is most important, but if someone is thinking about starting a done for you like agency type of thing, definitely having the right pricing, having the right scope and just having boundaries around the work that you're doing.
So good. So good. I feel like there's a special place for people who offer done for you services because it's like that's a lot of effort and energy and people to deal with. So I commend you, honey. I commend you because listen, I be trying to remove myself from stuff so that, I don't have to have as many interactions, not because I don't love people, but because it's like the people, but then also having to deliver, in that timeline and then manage the relationships. It's just, I think that's such a unique space. So I think it's incredible whenever someone can do done for you services and have a thriving business around it. One of the things I wanted to go back to that you talked about was systems. So what do you mean when you say systems? I heard you say automation, but what are some of the key and important systems that business owners need to have in place, specifically speakers, coaches, service providers? That's typically who our audience is. Like, what type of systems do you think it's essential for them to have in place?
Okay, so I want to answer or make another comment regarding the done for you before I answer that. So this was actually a pivot for me. So before, like last year, I said I made a huge pivot. So before I was doing like traditional coaching, and God was like, "You need to do done for you services." So I would say this isn't necessarily my choice as much as it is God's like, "Hey, I need to redirect your business." So so I will say that, but it does take a special kind of patience to do it. But as far as the systems that they need, so if we look at our business in different functions, right? So think about your marketing. So you're going to need systems for marketing. You're going to need systems for your sales. You're going to need systems for your actual delivery of your products and services. And so when we think about systems, these are all the pieces that need to go in place in order for your work, in order for your business to flow effectively and efficiently. So I'm thinking about like, what are the software and the tools? What is the actual workflow that we're going through in order for this thing to be efficient and for you to be able to serve your clients with excellence? So specifically when I'm working with my clients, we're looking at what's your marketing system? Like, how are we getting visibility? How are we getting eyeballs on your product and service and your brand? And so what's the software we're using? What's the workflow? What's the actual strategy? And then when it comes to sales, how are we actually onboarding people? How are you enrolling people? Like what are your offers? Like what's the systems that you're using as far as software goes? And then the actual delivery standpoint, what's that workflow look like? What is the software necessary for you to show up with excellence and serve them with excellence? So I think it's a loaded question, but there are so many aspects, but I specifically look at marketing, sales, and the actual delivery of your product or service. Hopefully I answered the question that makes sense.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see business owners make today that like gets under your skin? That just like, you like, oh, I wish we could do better.
Oh, so many. One, not having systems, right? So that's always gonna like drive me crazy. But I think the biggest thing that really works my nerves is prioritizing the wrong things. I think a lot of people have for so long prioritized the aesthetic of things and not necessarily the actual functionality and delivery. Although aesthetic is very important, I think if we spend more time on making sure we actually have a solid foundation for business, we actually have solid strategies, systems, and we can actually deliver what we're marketing, that would, to me, would be more important. So I think a lot of people just focus on the wrong things as opposed to really making sure I have a solid business that's going to generate results so that I can have repeat clients and revenue is no longer an issue.
Come on, repeat clients where revenue is no longer an issue, baby. Like, listen, but systems is what leads you there. Like, how you think businesses are making money year after year. Even if we walk into a Target, they got items on the shelves every single day, and people are buying stuff every single day. They got systems in place to get the products from wherever the distribution sites are, or the warehouses to the distribution sites to get them on the shelves. Like, there's a system for everything. So if you think that these companies that's been around for forever, even though, they're amazing, McDonald's, Target, Best Buy, all these companies, they got systems in place. If they need systems, why don't you? Like, why would you be exempt? Anywho, what do you do when you're struggling in your faith? Like, when you're struggling in faith in your business, like, how do you show up? What do you do? How are you drawing closer to God instead of, all the other things we could be doing? Like, what do you do when you're struggling in your faith?
So let me go ahead and just recap all of 2023, right? Because that's exactly what 2023 was for me. I would say the one thing that I do, well, let me just say it like this. I think a lot of times when it comes to struggling in faith in business, I think for most people, it's the not getting what we think we should have at that present moment. Or at least that's been my struggle. Like, hey, Lord, like, look, I feel like I should have been at this milestone, or I should have been this, and this person is, and it's a lot of comparison. It is a lot of, I think I should have, entitlement. So that's usually the cause of my struggle with my faith. And that was me all of 2023. So what I had to do was really get silent. So I will tell you, last year specifically, because when I made that pivot, I literally had to shut everything down because I run ads. I'm like, I shut down my ads. I switch up my offer. Like, I literally had to shut everything down, shut everybody out, and like literally fast for most of 2023 and really get clear on what God was telling me to do. And when I did that, I realized that, okay, the reason that your faith is struggling right now is because you're trying to do stuff in your own will versus what I'm telling you to do. So you need to get at the feet of Jesus and hear what he's telling you to do. And then it won't be a struggle. And so that's what I had to do all of 2023. Like, I had to pump the brakes because I had this vision of what I wanted things to look like, what numbers I wanted to hit. Like this, I just had this whole vision that was not aligned with what God wanted me to do. And until things started to go awry and I really had to pause, like that was the moment where I really got quiet, really started getting in my word, really started praying, seeking God concerning what he wanted me to do. And that's when things open up and turn. That's when I made the pivot. That's when everything just started making sense. When he told me to shut people, silence people, get people out of my ear, stop following these people, that's when things started making sense. So to answer your question, what do I do when my faith gets low, which really means that, Lord, I feel like I should be somewhere where I'm not right now. I really have to shut down, get quiet, and really hear what God's telling me to do.
Woo, baby. I think all of us can relate to feeling like, Lord, why haven't I hit XYZ goal? Or, and even the comparison sweeping in of like, I feel like I'm the best at this and this other person out here, and I feel like their stuff ain't even half as good as what I got going on over here. Like, I think we can all relate to that, but understanding that like God really does have his own timeline for us, and his timeline includes him getting the glory out of it, right? Like some of the stuff like that we want and desire, like honestly, at the end of last year, at the end of 2023, I didn't hit the milestone in business that I would have wanted to hit, but how I felt inside was incredible. I felt like I had been obedient to God. I had been doing what God told me. I had been impacting the people God told me to impact. And even though I didn't hit the numbers that I wanted to hit, I'm like, God, I realized that this is the thing I needed to feel. So I don't really even need the number that I say I need to have the level of fulfillment that I was able to receive. So I feel like sometimes we get so focused and think that on these big goals and think that that's going to make us feel a certain way, when in reality, like, we really should just be aiming to please God and do what he wants us to do. And of course, we know the money and all the other stuff makes us feel great and secure in certain areas and accomplish, but it's not the end goal. God is the ultimate reward. Listen, he is the exceeding and great reward. Okay. So one thing that I was going to ask you is, when it comes to building a six-figure business, what do you think are 3 things that every single business owner needs to have in place? Or what
Okay.
are three essential things? Like it don't have to be business related systems, but what are three essential things?
Okay, God, first and foremost. You got to have a prayer life. You got to have a fasting life. You got to have a tithing life and a sowing life. Support is definitely necessary. I would not be able to do the work that I do if I didn't have the support of my husband. Like before we got on, I told you my situation with my daughter being sick. Like had it not been for my husband knowing that, hey, she has a podcast interview, let me just not even tell her what's going on. I had to walk out to find out. So support is the second thing. And I'm always going to say systems. I'm always going to say systems. So system support. And then God has to be the CEO of your business, has to be.
Man, I think, I feel like I've been coming across these conversations around like Black women who are independent, that are unlearning their independence. And I've heard conversations of that really in relationship with marriage, but I feel like God be doing that with me, just with my relationship with him. Like, let's let you settle down, pipe down a little bit. I got this over here. And so I just think it's so interesting how God can shift us to a place to being like, open to what he wants us to do, and then putting systems in place around that, right? Like, and what made me think about that is like when you said that God is the CEO of our businesses, right? Like this is literally letting him take the reins. And sometimes it requires us to like be like, well, I don't have an answer, but I don't need to have an answer if he hasn't given it to me yet. Like he's gonna make sure I have the answer in the timing that I need to have it. And so one of the questions that I like to ask everybody who comes on the podcast is, what do you tell the woman who's afraid of going after her next big thing?
What would I tell the woman who's afraid of going after her next big thing? Oh, cast out that spirit of fear and do it. Do it. And I know we love to say, yeah, feel the fear and do it anyway. Like literally, I think we have to realize as believers, right, that we are on assignment in everything that we do. So a lot of times going after that next big thing is about us taking ourselves out of it and knowing that God has a purpose and a plan and an assignment for us. And we just got to go with that. Those are our marching orders. So do it. Even if you feel unprepared, even if you feel inadequate, even if you feel like you don't have the support that you need, if God tells you to do something, then it is our duty to be obedient and to actually do it. So that's what I would say. It sounds probably kind of like tough love, but I think that's how I live by. Like if God's telling me to do it, then I have no choice but to do it.
You don't have no other option. And then it's like when you start thinking about it, it's like it's God giving you the instruction. Like he know you're gonna be all right. He know like everything is gonna work out. He know, yes, it's gonna make you uncomfortable, but that's why he literally told Joshua, haven't I commanded you? Like I love that verse, because I be feeling like it's how like Black mamas be like, girl, didn't I just tell you? Like, haven't I commanded you? Did I not tell you? Like, be bold and courageous. And it goes on to say, like, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Like, we don't got nothing to worry about. Y'all, like, I'm very obsessed with that. Like, as y'all can see, I have a book called Bold and Courageous. But literally, I'm very obsessed with the concept of do it scared, because God's going to be with you. Like, if you have that in your mind, like, you going to be okay. So I know this has been so incredible. This has been so amazing. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you today. I would love to know how we can stay connected with you moving forward, and if you have any resources that you can share with us.
Yeah, so you can stay connected with me. My primary platform is Instagram. I am at the Fo Alexander. That's the Fo Alexander. And yeah, so I have a special gift for the podcast listeners. If they head to go.foalexander.com/go-getter, I'll have a special treat for you, and it's going to give you my exact marketing and sales system to help you be able to make more while doing less in your coaching, consulting, or service-based business.
I love that so much. We love a good resource that's going to get us together. But seriously, thank you so, so much for being here. You have been incredible, and love you, and sending all the blessings your way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Of course. Y'all, this episode has been totally incredible. Thank you guys so much for listening. I pray that you guys have an amazing rest of your day. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Go Getter Podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Go Getter Podcast. If you love this conversation, you're going to love the panels and workshops that are at Go Getter Conference. It's our premier event of the year, and it happens annually. It's going to help you market and monetize your God-given ideas and connect with women from across the globe. Head over to gogetterconference.com to check it out right now. And just for staying until the end of this episode, we have a special gift for you, the Go Getter Plan and Profit Workbook. This workbook is going to help you plan your income for the year. So head to gogetterpodcast.com/plan and profit to get your copy. And don't forget to drop a 5-star review if you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you on the next episode of the Go Getter Podcast.